Hello and welcome back to Witches of the Moon. I'm Eva Maria, your Monday hostess. And this week, our topic is going to be magical depression. Yes, you heard me right. Magical depression. It's a term that, before we decided on this topic, I actually wasn't very familiar with myself. But then I realized what this term refers to. This term refers to a sort of magical dark night of the soul. And for some, it can be spiritual as well, depending if magic for said people is something that is tied very much into their spirituality or not. For some of us it is, for some of us it is less so. But some might consider magical depression to be similar to the concept of psychic burnout. First, before I get into what is magical depression, let me explain to you what is psychic burnout. Psychic burnout, it is a state of being where you're sort of almost burning the candle at both ends. You're energetically just drained. You've been doing so much, I guess, work for yourself, for others, maybe doing a lot of readings, picking up on a lot of external vibrations and energies and so on and so forth, and it becomes too much. And it comes to the point where you are just burnt out. Sometimes that can even lead to physical illnesses and etc. In the case of magical depression, while it can be sort of similar, but magical depression, it's more of, as I said before, a dark night of the soul in a sense, but relating to, again, magic and or spirituality, if that is a factor in your magical practice. In the case of magical depression, you basically lose your passion for your path and or craft. You may often, in times of magical depression, you may stop practicing for a while, by choice or just by circumstance, by the fact that you are magically depressed, depending if it's something you're willfully like, fuck this, I'm done, or if it's just you're not feeling it, so you're not doing it. You might even begin to question your beliefs in terms of your magical practice and or your spiritual path if it is linked to your magical practice, but not in a more positive sense, not in the way that you might objectively examine if your beliefs are your own for your own reasons, or if you are believing things because people have told you those things. I think that is very healthy to objectively question that. And it's not in a more positive sense in that you may perhaps at times as a practitioner still have passion for your path, still feel great about it, but you might start to question sometimes at certain points if you have outgrown what you are doing or what you're believing, maybe for another path or another practice. That happens, but that does not necessarily constitute a magical period of depression. In magical depression, you sort of start to question what's the point, you know what I mean? In a lot of cases, not in every case. There are times when practitioners that are facing this, they may be like, I don't want to be like this, but this is what's going on. I'm just not feeling it. Regardless, these are just some examples of what may happen in cases of magical depression. As I said before, it's sort of, the best way I can describe it is like a dark night of the soul. It's very much like clinical depression. You know that you should feel passion for life and all that kind of stuff logically, but for whatever reason, you're just not there. You know what I mean? So it's similar to that, but in the sense of your craft and or your path. So, what might we do in times when we find ourselves magically depressed? Because I will say, in the past, I have had my periods of magical depression. I'm sure a lot of us have. My first suggestion would be to examine what brought you here. Assuming you're in a period of magical depression, what brought you to being magically depressed? There are any number of things that can bring on a bout of magical depression. Um, could it be, for example, maybe you've outgrown many books or informational resources that have to do with your magical path or your spiritual practice. A lot of the material that is out there, honestly, is really geared toward people who are new to the fold. I've had this too, where you walk into a bookstore and you literally scan the entire New Age section and you're like, yeah, this is pretty much all like stuff that I'm fairly familiar with, and you feel like, I feel like I've outgrown this. A lot of this is rather elementary, and that can be very frustrating. It can be a situation like that. Maybe with experience, the sort of magic, the wonder has faded. This is something that can happen. I've also faced this. In the beginning, everything was wild and amazing and like, oh my God, and so inspiring, and then it begins to feel very natural after a while. It stops feeling so wild, spooky and wild. Not to say that it's not just, not to say that it lacks meaning, or not to say that it lacks effectiveness, but you sort of don't have the same new eyes, later on that you have in the beginning. It's just different. It's kind of like the difference between, a virgin considering the idea of having sex with someone who's kind of been around the block and had a few partners. You know what I mean? You're not gonna see things the same way, and while it can still be, pretty huge, the experience, of sex can be huge. It's not the same for someone who's experienced it already as it is for someone who's never experienced it. The feelings are different in terms of emotions and what's going on in your head. Well, the same can kind of happen with magic and spirituality. Once you've become acquainted with something, I don't want to quite say it loses its novelty, but your view of things will change. They will. Your view will change. So that's something that can happen. Another potential scenario could be, did a spell or a series of spells that you might have tried, did they not work out for you? Maybe you're feeling disappointed. Maybe you're feeling like, oh, this is a bunch of hooey. That could have thrown you into a period of magical depression. Now, I will say, well, if that is the case, I wouldn't be so quick. If I were you, my suggestion would be I wouldn't be so quick to judge magic as being ineffective only because for some reason a work or a series of works has not successfully produced the results you're looking for. There can be any number of reasons why. Another, and I think maybe one of the more commonplace scenarios of what can put you into magical depression, could it be that your life is a little crazy or difficult right now, or in that period where you find yourself in magical depression? Could it be that your focus really needs to be more on the mundane because a lot of really heavy shit is going on? That can very much be the case. That's usually the case. Most often when I've found myself in past periods of magical depression, that has been the case. Your focus is shifted away to the mundane because there are things you need to address. Not with spells, but with you need to be doing certain things in actual life, like in mundane life, physically just taking mundane actions, steps to handle your scandal, so to speak. A lot of times that's what has pulled me out of practice for periods. And I think that's kind of natural. And I will say, by the way, before I continue on, if it is that life is just crazy and there's just a lot going on, I don't think you should feel guilty that your focus has shifted to addressing problems in your mundane life, or situations or struggles, in your mundane life. I think if anything, that's the most responsible thing to do. I don't think, if let's say you're in a financial crisis and you need to really be focusing on working and saving and straightening out things, maybe contacting a credit union or whatever you need to do to straighten out your finances. Like, if you are burying your head in magical books and not doing the things that can actually help to extract you in mundane life from your financial crisis situation, I don't think that's the most responsible course of action. You really should, while it's okay to do things as well, if you're, for whatever reason, being pulled more in the direction like, handle your scandal, you need to really handle this, you need to deal with this, that's something that I personally believe is there for a reason. Sometimes you really just need to handle your scandal, so to speak. You really need to address what needs addressing. And sometimes it's not like a crisis in terms of something that you need to remedy. Sometimes it can be an emotional situation of another nature. Let's say maybe you've lost someone, you're grieving, or you're going through some serious transitions, something huge in your life, and you need to emotionally deal with it. Well, not everybody is the same. Some people may find that their spirituality helps to carry them through situations, and some people, prayer and things like that, and rituals and spells and the other things may help them out, to process things they're going through. But for other people, that might be a little much. Some people might need to just be and just feel, what they're going through. They might just need to grieve, or they might just need to get their head on straight, or do whatever they need to do to get through whatever it is they're going through. So I personally would feel that if it's mundane life pulling you away from your practice, maybe that's not something you necessarily have to fight. Just some thoughts on that. Some other scenarios. Did something traumatic happen to you relating to your path or practice? Did you have a freaky, scary experience? Sometimes that happens, though it is less common, but it does happen. And another thing that might be a reason, a motivation, or not a motivation, a factor in your current, let's say if you're in a state of magical depression, another factor in that might be, for example, if something distasteful happened, something that left a bad taste in your mouth. I've had situations like this as well. There was one time where I was actually friends with a girl who was a habitual liar, very, very horrid habitual liar. And we were friends for a short time. We hung out for a short time. And she was telling me all kinds of things, that, oh, I do this and I do that and I believe this and I've seen that and I've experienced this and blah, 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 blah. Well, when that friendship finally came to an end, because of my dealings with her, for a while, I had such a bad taste in my mouth. I didn't touch magic for a good while. I just didn't. I was literally just so turned off to it. And it's sad, that she had put me in that place at that point in time. But that's something else that might happen, you may have dealings with someone that just makes you sort of not disgusted at magic itself and not disgusted at your spirituality itself, but because of the association, you might sometimes find yourself just like, ugh, I just need to be away from this. I can't right now. It happens. That's another thing that may happen. These are just some suggestions, some ideas, some potentials of what might put you into a state of magical depression. Now, once you have examined, found perhaps the cause or the likely cause of what brought you into your period of magical depression, then I think what is necessary is perhaps some objective introspection. Putting the situation into context for yourself. for example, if it's that you've outgrown resources, maybe, if you were to ask yourself, well, if I found some resource that really inspired me or actually taught me something that I didn't already know or something that is new to me, would that change my situation? Would I feel more, I can't think of a better word than inspired. Would I feel more inspired to pick up and go on? Would that really shake things up for me? Or is this deeper than that? Is there something else? For example, if it's a spell or a series of spells that didn't work out, if you're introspecting on that, you may ask yourself, well, what might have been the reason for those spells not working? Was it really that magic is hooey, or did I do something that didn't help the work to succeed, or maybe my approach was off, or is it deeper than that? We're all different, and it's hard for me to give a one-size-fits-all answer of what can drag you out of a magical depression. Because you know what? I don't know your reason for becoming magically depressed, first of all. I don't know what conclusions or epiphanies or what things you might, what thoughts, ideas, and feelings, and so on and so forth you might touch upon and confront in introspecting about what brought you to that state. I don't know necessarily in your specific situations what might bring you out of your state. There's not a one-size-fits-all remedy. There's just not. And if I told you that there was, I'd be a fucking liar, okay? And I'm not going to lie to you because that's not what I do. In my experience with magical depression, that's what I can speak best on because I've had a few situations. I told you about the one with the girl who was a habitual liar who left a horrible taste in my mouth. There were a few times where life just kind of pulled me away and was like, no, your focus needs to be over here because this is more important right now. Well, eventually I found myself after a series of these on and off, I would kind of fall in and out of practice. It was like an ebb and a flow with no particular pattern. But eventually I found myself feeling like I don't want to be separate from this because the times that I have been involved with my spirituality and my magic, those times I truly felt full. I felt alive, I felt whole, and I started asking myself, what can I do that might help me to feel more connected? And I think over time, I sort of came to the conclusion that I needed something that would require me to be involved with it on a regular basis. For me, exchange was something that really started to pull me back. I think at that point I started to realize how important the exchange of ideas, the community, really was. Now, I'm not saying your solution is going to be go make a Facebook group. That is not necessarily what's going to work for you. Something else may. Something else may indeed. But for me, what really pulled me out of the funk was being involved with other practitioners. And also, I think my focus started to shift in that I see and acknowledge the spiritual and the magical in everyday life. Now, again, while with experience, this feels less profoundly, magically amazing and spooky, hocus pocus wild than it did when I first started, there's a certain inspiration and reassurance in knowing that in my everyday life, in my mundane life, my magical practice and spirituality do play part. If you find that you want to be involved in your magical practice or in your spiritual practice and you are facing a dark night of the soul, I think getting involved with something. Maybe for you it'll be community. Maybe for you it'll be taking some classes or something at a local, witchy shop, or maybe it'll be something else, doing a YouTube challenge or whatever that relates to the witchy community. I don't know, but I think getting involved with something that requires you to be regularly sort of committed to it might help. Might. I say might because I don't know your situation. I wish I could be more insightful on this. I wish I could give you something of greater substance, but it's kind of, as I said before, it's really hard to speak in general terms that will suit everyone's situation because everyone's situation is different. However, I'm going to wrap up this video. I do welcome any of you who are feeling sort of like you're slipping into a magical depression situation, or if you have any questions regarding, let's say you're not in a state of magical depression, if you have any questions regarding magical depression, in specific hypothetical or real cases, please do ask away in the comments. If you have anything to share or add or anything to bring up, any thoughts or feelings in regard to this topic, I really do welcome you to bring this up. I also would like to know, what would you all, each of you who are willing to comment, what would you personally suggest to anyone facing a period of magical depression? Have you been through it? And if you have, what would you suggest? Maybe there's something you've done that helped pull you out of that magical depression. Maybe there's something, or even if you haven't really found yourself in much of a case of magical depression, maybe so far you've kind of lucked out, knock wood. But what would you suggest to anyone who might be facing something like that? Not only would I like to hear that, I'm sure there are fellow viewers, there are people that read the comments. So please feel free, let us know, because we all would love to hear from you. In your experience, what do you suggest might be an approach to handling magical depression? So I look forward to your comments. Also, please stick around. I know you stuck around for a pretty long video now, but please do stick around this week. Check out everyone's videos. Stay tuned. I'm really interested in hearing what one of my fellow hosts will have to say on this topic, because this is a really interesting topic to me. A lot of people, I've come across a lot of people asking questions relating to this. When they're like, oh, I need a daily practice, or I feel like I'm not connected, or I'm not feeling it anymore. This is something I've heard people over time ask time and time again. They want to know about this. So, it's interesting to me as well. And because I've been in periods in the past of magical depression a few times, this is something that really does kind of get in my head and make me think too, Maybe I'm sort of filing away what everyone says in case I should ever find myself there again, because you know what, anything's possible. You never know, you never know. But with that said, I'm going to wish you all blessed be and ashe. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. I hope I gave you something of use. And until next time, until our next exchange, you stay awesome, and bye-bye for now.